Hey, congratulations on this interesting documentary.
Thank you.
Why is it so important to actually premiere it here at the Santa Barbara International Film Festival?
Yeah, so this is our international premiere. We had the world premiere at the Whistler Film Festival in Canada. I'm Canadian. The film's made by a Canadian production company, so we premiered in Canada for the world, but we're premiering here for international, and we're absolutely thrilled. It's such a great festival. It's amazing timing because yesterday was the Women's March, and this film, Pandoras Box, is largely, it's very integral to the women's movement, the issue of menstrual inequity and period poverty. So it's a very important moment for the movement. And so to be able to actually march in the Santa Barbara Women's March yesterday while sort of being here to promote this film has been incredible. So, and we've had some great reception. We absolutely love this festival.
Absolutely. So what was the initial thought? What brought about that inspired you to do a documentary just like this?
Yeah, so the idea was originally sort of brought to me from Diva International, who are a Canadian company who makes something called the Diva Cup, which is a menstrual cup. And they sort of have been involved in this social issue of, menstruation education, menstrual hygiene, menstrual inequity, which is what the film's about, and period poverty and the stigmatization around periods. They've been very involved in sort of the movement of trying to sort of overcome a lot of those things. And so they wanted to really get behind the social issue and bring it to a wider audience. And they thought, what better way than making a documentary about it? So with their, they then sort of assigned this production company, Media One, and myself as a documentary filmmaker to make this film. And we traveled over 4 continents. We traveled to India, Africa, Europe, and North America. And we just really tried to get a sort of global perspective about how periods are such a barrier for so many people around the world. 800 million people are menstruating right now around the world, and yet there are so many injustices and inequities around what it means for them to be able to get access to the products they need or the hygiene they need. And so it's a huge equality issue. It's actually a gender equality issue. That's what we say in the film. It's like it's not a women's issue. It's a gender equality issue. If girls can't go to school and women can't go to work because they can't afford supplies to be able to menstruate with dignity out in society, then how is that helping sort of equitable society? So it's a huge issue. It was a very sort of daunting one to make as a filmmaker because there are so many angles and so many places, and it's such a global issue. But I think what the film's going to do for a lot of people is kind of infuriate and inspire people. I think people will be quite surprised by what they see in this film.
Well, tell me how you basically reached out for the connections to all over the world, to these women, to these organizations. Was it all through Diva, or you actually reached out yourself?
Yeah, no, we definitely reached out to a lot of places. I mean, the great thing about this issue is that so many people are trying to come up with solutions and activism and all sorts of things. There's a big movement afoot. So we kind of wanted to use some of the organizations that are doing things around the world, like Femme International. They were amazingly helpful in the Kenya and Uganda part of when we were filming, and they helped us gain access to quite remote villages in places like Kenya, where it is such an issue that girls miss school 5 to 7 days a month when they're menstruating, and they literally sit at home bleeding because they have they can't afford products or they can't access them, and then they drop out of school. And what we also did, which was great in Kenya with the help of Femme International and some of the organizations there, is we actually spoke to quite a few politicians and sort of change makers who are trying to do something about it. So that was great. We really reached out with them. And then something that I really thought was important is bringing it to our own backyards. Here in North America, or I'm from London originally, and in London there's headlines out of London, out of the UK, often about period poverty. It's a huge issue there right now. And so I really wanted to sort of show the audience that it's not just a developing world's issue. It's not just a developing country issue. And so we, in the Bronx in New York, we film with some formerly incarcerated women who have really harrowing horror stories about basically human rights abuses in prisons around access to menstrual products. And what they have to say is really shocking. And the people sort of struggling and the people trying to make a change at the sort of federal, at the government level, to try and get sort of, products out to schools and to prisons that should just be free. They should just be available.
Is it more of a women's issue, or is it more of a poverty issue? Because it seems like a lot of the stress is with women in poverty.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the idea it's definitely a poverty issue as well. I mean, I think the idea that I think it's 25 million American women and girls are living on the poverty line, and if you can't afford groceries and you can't afford a bus ticket, you can't afford menstrual supplies. You sort of prioritize what you can afford and what you can't, and so menstrual supplies gets kind of pushed down that list. But in turn, that means that it's definitely a sort of equality issue. It's the idea that yes, for so many people they can't afford supplies, but why are they even having to pay for them? Why is it something that one has to pay for and can't get just open access to? And in the States, 32 states still tax menstrual products as non-necessary items, right? So it's a sales tax that is inequitable, it's unfair, and it's wrong. And so that's something that one of the activists in the film is actually trying to really sort of get behind the idea that so many states should be repealing this tax. So many things aren't taxed as necessities, like Viagra and dandruff shampoo and condoms and Bibles. Why are menstrual supplies that are a necessity for life? I mean, there is no question that they are a necessity for women and people who menstruate. So why are they taxed?
Huh. Well, one of the things that it seems like you're on the brink of is trying to get it to political in its own way. But is it to basically more empowerment of women, or is it to educate men on this issue?
You mean the film?
Yeah.
I think both. I think absolutely both. I think it's hugely important that this is... One of the things with the film is that, we sort of go into this that why is this still an issue today? Why is it an issue? And yes, on the one hand, it's an issue because it's always been a women's thing. Menstruation, it doesn't directly affect men because they don't menstruate. A lot of men don't menstruate. Some trans, and we look at that in the film, do. But the main sort of, I think a huge goal with this film is just getting people to talk about it, because there is such a stigma, there's such a culture of silence around menstruation that if you can't talk about the issue, how can you address it? How can we get people in government talking about it? How can we get mothers talking about it to their daughters and educating them? Because education's a huge part of it if it's taboo and it's stigmatized in so many parts of the world, including our own society here in North America. And so, if we can get people talking about it, then that's a huge part of the battle, So I think that's one of the huge goals of the film, is to just destigmatize it. And there's a lot of amazing people in the film who are working on that. We have a great interview with Madam Gandhi, Kiran Gandhi, who's the hip hop artist. She ran the London Marathon in 2015, free bleeding, in order to expose the sort of stigmatization around it. And she got some terrible, comments about what she did. People were horrified, and some people were like, yeah, good for you. And what she was doing was just trying to expose the idea that, so many people, she had the privilege to make that decision. She was like, I'm going to decide to run this without products. So many people cannot make that decision, and she wanted to sort of highlight that. And raise awareness around stigmatization. So I think that's a huge part of making this film.
And were there any difficulties filming all around the world, or were you faced opposition or anything like that?
Generally not. We really were sort of, we were very pleased with the sort of reception we had to talking about this. One of the sort of slight issues, I would say, was getting some of the menstruators to talk about their experiences in places where it is taboo. So particularly in India, some people were it took a little coaxing to get stuff out of them. And we were an entirely female crew, which I'm very proud to say. I make a lot of documentaries and I work a lot with, male crews, and that's great. But it was really, we made a very conscious decision to make this a full female crewed film, which was great. And so there was that sort of, people had that sort of, trust and kind of a lot of women surrounding them when they were doing these interviews, so that sort of helped. No, I mean, in general, access was fine. And in Kenya, we got some great reception from some of the politicians there who, Kenya is was the first country to bring sort of open, free access to girls in schools. It hasn't quite panned out like they intended. It was a legislative decision, and then it hasn't. It's taken years to actually, reach all these communities. So it's still something they're trying to do. But it's that intention was very early on in the sort of menstrual movements. That's really great. So we found that there's a lot of places around the world that are really sort of making that move towards sort of menstrual equity. It's just rolling it out is the challenge.
Excellent. And you have more projects after this documentary?
Yeah, absolutely. Documentary is my thing, so I make a lot of films. I just finished a film called Cheating Hitler, Surviving the Holocaust, which is following 3 Holocaust survivors back to Europe to sort of discover things about their past that they've always wondered about, taking them to places they haven't been to since 1942 or 1943. So that was a very difficult one to work on. And I'm working on a film now about a transgender woman in Toronto who's a sex worker and has been involved in a lot of violence towards the trans community. She's subject of a lot of violence. So
excellent. And I have one last parting question for you. So when this documentary is going to be seen all around the world by viewers and audiences, what is the one most important lesson you hope they learn?
Goodness, I mean, I think just the idea that we just need to talk about periods. We need to talk about menstruation, and again that it's not a women's issue. This whole question of menstrual inequity, menstrual, access to supply is not a women's issue. It's a gender equality issue. So I would love to see this film being shown to in schools, educational places, to boys and girls alike. This is definitely something that men and boys need to get behind because it is a gender equality issue.
Excellent answer. Hey, thank you very much. And congratulations for showing it here at the Santa Barbara International Film Festival.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.